I definitely have something I want to convey and talk about that I'm excited about, that I'm experiencing, but I don't know how long I'll talk about it because it's simple. So we'll see how it goes, but I've been shrinking my world. You know, there's a way of looking at things that Justin has taught me, called knowledge and being. And I'm re-examining what my own personal ratio is with that. Being would be like a way of very simply, I was sitting around the corner and I was feeling the sun on me. And my world was just shrunk to feeling the warmth of the sun on me. Like a lizard can do that. And it's so simple. It's like, I know, it's a truth I feel that the sun is warm and it's pleasant. It's a simple experience. And I think I, like many people, have been fooled into thinking we live in an information age, a complex age. And so our worlds are like crazy complex. And you take that lizard and you put them in a world of bank accounts, cell phones, grocery shopping, cleaning supplies, just like life is like this chaotic, complex thing. It's a miracle we can function in it. It's like over the last, I don't know, 100 years. This is 2025, so 1925. Yeah, a lot has happened. And it's been, what? 2025. Didn't I say? Please. I know what year it is. Don't take that away from me. I'm feeling vulnerable. But really, that's the question, is like sort of what do we actually know, and what is just like crazy add-ons that we try to pretend we can keep up with. I had this experience, like, I have it fairly often. I don't know about you, but it's like I'm trying to get into something on my computer or my phone, and it's like password. Like sometimes if you go from you go from my house and then I go to town, it wants me to re-log in. I don't know if I'm doing something wrong or this is just routine, but it's like, okay, what was my password? And I have a password manager, that keeps these passwords straight. But sometimes I have to log back into the password manager, and then I didn't keep up with it and put in my new password. So I'm like 20 minutes later, I'm still not into the program I want to get into to see what my bank account balance is. And, I'm really glad there's bank account security, because there's a lot of not good players out there. But it's like we're so protected, we created this complexity, and then you have good players and bad players, and you have to protect from the that and the that and the that, and it's made like the thinking function a little too predominant, the knowledge, and then it gets out of hand. So I'm kind of going back to basics is what I want to stick with here. And I'm really enjoying some of Justin's methods, tools, because I find that they are reliable compasses to that being. They break down tiny little moments, and I feel like in this complex river of information and activity and whatever, there is like a twig. my mental picture is like a river, and you're kind of swept down in it. You've been swimming, and then it just like kind of takes you, and you're like, what can I grab onto? And a life raft of some kind, a twig of some kind, a branch of some kind. And I feel like I'm grabbing on to these very simple methods and going, that I know is true. That is a moment of like calm in the action, where there's something I can rest my weight on. Feel like I'm touching something solid, some truth, experientially, not with a thought. And I think that's where we've been deceived. I've been deceived that if I can think about anything, it's truth. And it's not. Sometimes that is, but not the ratio that we have come to accept. So it's not that thoughts are bad, it's thoughts without that lizard simple being connected to them. It gets bad. It's like, one of the audiobooks I've been listening to paints kind of a broad sweep of history, and I can just do like a brief version of this, but that at one point we thought the earth was the center of the universe. And the religious people got a hold of that and said, oh, and if the earth is the center of the universe, then God's somewhere out here on the edge of that universe. And then somebody started saying 1,000 years later or whatever, somebody said, okay, no, the sun is the center of the universe. And the people wanted to kill the person that said that the sun was the center of the universe. And then there was, some people came up with the idea of gravity. They were trying to, this audiobook is about tides, and what's affecting or pulling on the ocean waters to pull it left and right and up and down. And the idea that there could be something far away that was affecting that was just, people couldn't get their head around that, And then eventually people figured out that the moon had something to do with the tides. But that was like, people wanted to kill each other over that idea. So you get the thing that I'm kind of walking away with is that there can be a trend of an idea that we're influenced by. I was thinking about just closer to home in our time frame. It's like when I grew up, it was common for people to spank kids. My parents did that, and then it became like, wow, that's just not happening, that's bad. So you had a philosophy, and then it was turned upside down, and, people wanted to kill each other over this one. So what is true? What is like a twig or something you can hold on to that is outside of trends, outside of philosophy, something that each of us as an individual can verify as a solid truth. Like, you breathe, right? If you stop, you can like close your eyes and you can feel the breath come in and out of you. You can know that thing. That's a verifiable experience. And to have methods that I have learned that take me back to like bite-sized moments of verifiable human experience, that it feels like a building block. And I have seen, I commonly, every periodically, I'll be having conversations with people, and this is how it applies to spiritual consciousness work, is that we take that overestimation of our thinking capacity, reasoning capacity, and we like try to skip over the simple basic steps, thinking we'll figure this out. We figured out everything else. Sort of. It's sort of working. If we just keep going fast enough, it'll all come together. But the basics really have their place. I think I like glitched out there for a minute. Hopefully these go together. But the conversations come around to revealing that Justin has taught some people these very simple basic methods, and soon a distortion happens. Soon there's like some crazy inverse creative, like how to make more of this, embellish it, let's password protect it, oh we'll build a cathedral on it, oh we'll weave these two together, you know, and the basics are left way over here. Because that's the culture we live in. If we've created all this technology and industry in 100 years, you put a method to help take you back to simplicity, you're going to go, that's not enough. No, let's create a motor engine out of it. Let's, you know, that's in us, you know. And I have had some clues that I'm like average intelligence, and even with average intelligence, I'm prone to this. The smarter you are, or the smarter you think you are, the more trouble you're going to get into. That was in one of the songs there, every man must fall. Fall to your actual state. What is our actual, how far are we from that lizard sitting in the sun? How complex are we actually? You know, it's like after being in a car collision, it's very apparent to me that I don't know whose idea was to go 60 miles an hour down the freeway, everybody talking on their phone and having an argument that morning, whatever. Anything could happen at any time. You know, it's somehow we come up with this automatic pilot that we are managing to get by on, but it's an illusion. And so I don't know how much more I have to say about it, but that I am really, really loving the basics. You know, it's sort of like if you thought you could do calculus and you're going back to, okay, let's try one to count to 10. Okay, maybe we could time 2 times 2, you know, but those are not bad. It's just sort of like, I had this thought of like, what if, you know, you get a driver's license? What if they had like a state of being license? Like you couldn't drive unless you had a state of being license, right? You couldn't use AI unless you had a state of being license. I think we're onto something. But I think at least we can start with spiritual work. You know, don't get fancy in your ideas and philosophy, but without sticking to the basics. You know, it's just a cultural bizarreness we happen to be born into of this time and place that we think we're smarter than we are. There was in this tape audiobook yesterday, I heard this statement, like kind of when Newton and Descartes, 1600s roughly, they were at this cusp of like where they were trying to start to get into the age of reason, but they still had some mysticism in them. And now I'm going to be on thin ice, but Descartes said this thing that he thought was, everybody thought was real cool, was that I think, therefore I am. And it set off this whole trend. And we're still running down the road with that trend. Well, maybe we're on the edge of revolution. You know, like what I'm saying is not that crazy. It's like there should be a state of being license to handle this technology, this life we've created, and we need to get back to that. So it's like a real revolutionary thing to do is to stick with the basics. That's what I have to say.
Wow. Oh, am I going to follow that? Oh, maybe this side. I was so sure I wouldn't be cold. But I did bring this, which is kind of amazing. that was just amazingly incredible, and I love that idea. I definitely think we should pursue that. The state of being license. I mean, that's the missing piece in us, and that's the missing piece. That's cool. Going back to the basics maybe is really where it's at. I mean, it just looks like proof to me. Gosh, that just triggered so many different stories and stuff. But looking at Amalthea and hearing this, what she's talking about, one of the stories that I've had up for me lately, I think maybe I told a couple of my friends who were heavy on good imagination, stories and good imagination, these two friends. So I told them this thing as we're out lopping Scotch broom, very ordinary thing to do, simple. And we were out there, and it triggered me remembering that as a kid, I loved Little House on the Prairie. That was my favorite show. Does everybody know that show? Mm-hmm. Little House on the Prairie? Okay. Well, it's in the, I don't even know what year it is, Coda. It's in Wisconsin, maybe 1800s, like when people are homesteading and coming over and trying to, live off the land, and it's hard, and it's a very simple life. They don't waste anything. They use their pigs for everything, including balls, to make a ball, and I read these stories too as a kid, and I just loved it. It came on TV at 5 o'clock at night, and it was like I was so excited, and I would go upstairs. There was an upstairs room in our house that was a living room, and then one of my brothers lived up there. He came when he was older, so he had like a whole wing to the house, and half brother. And so I would be able to go up to this room, and nobody was in there at 5 o'clock at night. Usually my brother was always watching the TV, but for some reason I was by myself at 5 o'clock at night. And I just remember the feeling of just so much relaxed, like it's all going to be okay, and it's going to be so good. And I had maximum hope in watching this show. It was like a religious experience for me. I didn't think of it that way then, but when I feel it now, it's like, it was just like I was getting something. I didn't know what it is, but it was feeding that being that Amal's talking about. There was a language there. There was a story there that fed me. And I was, trying to think about it, like what were those elements, or really feel about it. But that, the elements that I loved the words, go to the well and fetch water. I just love that. I still love that, You get it, like it's fetching water. It's, chop wood, carry water, or whatever. Like I learned that 5 years ago or something, but that's what it was. It was like they did simple things. They baked bread, and they cooked, and they hung out the meat to dry, and, they fetched water, and they chopped wood, and they did those really simple things, and they wore petticoats. So that was also a thing. I think that's in there, petticoats. It's kind of a joke. But, I loved it. They'd run through the fields in the petticoats down the flowery hill, Laura, And I was just like, yes, we're doing that on this hill. But I think it's just like a feeling of going back to something simple and natural and beautiful and basic in us, that there's a hunger for that in us human beings. We want that, even though we're in this culture of AI and maximum technology, and it's going to change quickly from here. But just that there's something in us that wants that simplicity, wants the basics, wants the simple math, because it's actually quite incredible. And the other thing I would do during this time is I would play outside every day, a lot, and talk to myself. I probably had games like that and talked to myself and created worlds until I was too old to be doing that, like 12 or 13 or something. But I would just like get out on my own, usually outside, and this is the story I told my friends, was we had like a air conditioning unit outside, and the top of it would get hot, so I could cook on it. just a couple drops of water. Psh, it would sizzle, and I could put my herbs on there and cook. I don't know about herbs because we just use salt and pepper at my house, but whatever it was, I was probably cooking steak, you know. But to have that, and then at the same time, I would fill up a plastic bag for, you know, wrapping newspapers in the days when that would happen. My brother did that, so I had those bags. Fill it with water, punch a hole in it, put a pin, like a writing pin, in it. That was a cow udder, and I'd go milk it. So I'd hang that somewhere across the way and go milk the cow, and it was a little messy, but get the pin back in there, bring the milk back to my children, probably a lot of them, you know, and whatever, do this whole life. And I was doing things like cooking and milking cows and taking care of children. That's all pretty basic stuff. And it was like magic. It was magical. You know, but we've lost that magic in ordinary life, in the ordinary simple things of living. You know, like maybe you've been on acid or something and you've realized like it's a fucking miracle to make a cup of tea. You know, it's just like, holy shit, you know, like you can barely believe it. But we've lost that, you know, just like it hurts. Like I want to think I'm a person who hasn't lost that, but I've lost it. And I know I've lost it when I use a tool that is to help us get back to that natural sense of magic and wonder and awe and miracle of life in the most basic things. That you use that tool, and I might get an opening to that world of magic, that it is magical to walk across land. You know, it is magical to be able to reach something and pick it up with our fingers. It is actually magical. It's unbelievably outrageous and miraculous. Unbelievably, we cannot even grok it. I know that in tastes, I know that in four visions, but it is not my moment-to-moment life unless I'm able to apply a tool. Then it is, and that tool at some point will be left behind, and the actual experience will be there. But we need the tool because we have left it so far behind. And that's, you know, that's makes so much sense to me what Amalthea is talking about in terms of we need to go back to the basics, that we've gotten really too far ahead of ourselves. And it's certainly easy to see with our use of technology that we're able to create this technology that we have no idea how to operate in a harmonious human way with. That part's missing. So I feel like I'm seeing some of those examples and feeling that reality and the gift that we have of ordinary life, you know, the ordinary moments in life. But we have learned and felt that that's not enough and we need something more. But it is absolutely, it is enough if we can actually focus on the ordinary in our lives, be there in a deeper way, in a more feeling way, in an expanded way, in dimensions, you know, a dimensional way, not because of our thinking, but that we're deeper in it, that ordinary then becomes extraordinary, that is what leads to extraordinary, is ordinary. So hearing the sound of our voice, being in our bodies as we sit here, walking and feeling the juice of life that's coming through, and all of the tiny little moments, that it's a sequence of moments, it's not a here to there, to feel that in our bodies, to have that experience as a human being, that is the gift, and it's constant, you know, it's that those moment after moment experiences are there, you know, like feeling the gift of having like something to go out and do. That's so fun to go out and mow, to go out. I know I talk about this a lot. It's like, oh no, I won't tell you another DR story. But you know, to do simple things like the joy of that, excruciating, really, joy of living, of doing those things, to be in a body and get to experience this. Like, oh, it is enough, you know? Anyway, that's something. And one other short story is that feels like Amalthea said lizard. She compared the experience she was having with the sun and the lizard. And oh, thank you. And I had a lizard experience this week, so I was like, oh, okay, I remembered it. But I'm not sleeping great in the last year. I wake up at like 3 a.m, and you know, maybe some of you understand this situation, but you wake up and you're not sleeping. And so for a while, I've been not sleeping, and I've been using a tool. I'm too tired to sit up and actually meditate, but I can use this tool laying there in bed. And so I'm doing that, and I find that I'm doing it for a long time, like maybe hours. It's hard to know, because it's kind of hard to know when you're awake and when you fall asleep and how long that frame is, you know. So it's sort of in this world. And I was talking to a friend about this last night, and how I slipped into a world where I was just aware of I'm breathing, aware of my heartbeat and how they go together, and feeling like, not like I'm breathing or that's my heartbeat, but disappearing in the formula, so that it felt almost like I was a lizard or a squirrel, you know, like some small, but you know, there's so much life in a lizard and a squirrel. Like, it's a lot of life. You could feel it, you know. Like, have you ever picked up a lizard? It's like something. And so I felt like that was the first image I had, was a lizard, and that it was just a lizard breathing and beating, you know, a just simple being, but no personality. I wasn't there, you know. So maybe because it was a dream, a little bit of a dream state or something, it felt like a drug trip. But it's, you know, super subtle, like a subtle feeling of this. It wasn't like I'm talking about it now, so it almost makes it like more than it was. But it was like one of those things that I think Emil was referring to as like, I know this, like, oh, maybe it's enough, like an informing in a being sense, that maybe it's enough to breathe, be breathed, and have a heart beating, and this other something that's lot power, you know, in there. I can feel it now. And that maybe that's enough, that we get the gift of actually being with that. But how rare it is that I'm with that, you know. So I'm not satisfied with having this taste and then forgetting all that. That's why I feel so lucky to have the tools and to have people to remind me and be around me and get me back to that hey, it might be okay that you're not sleeping. What are you missing? You know, maybe you could think of that as a gift, that it's part of your path to not sleep and use a tool and then get this forevision. So anyway, I feel so grateful, and I think that's it.